Scripture reading comes from 1 Corinthians chapter 13. 1 Corinthians 13, I'll be reading verses 8 through 13. Love never fails, but if there are gifts of prophecy, they will be done away. If there are tongues, they will cease. If there is knowledge, it will be done away. For we know in part, and we prophesy in part. But when the perfect comes, the partial will be done away. When I was a child, I used to speak like a child, think like a child, reason like a child. When I became a man, I did away with childish things. For now we see in a mirror dimly, but then face to face. Now I know in part, but then I will know fully, just as I have also been fully known. But now faith, hope, love abide, these three, but the greatest of these is love.
I'm glad to be back from the Freed Hardman lectures. I appreciate the elders letting us go. I will say this, it was a whole lot easier when I was a whole lot younger to sit in lectureships all day and to go until 8 or 9 o'clock at night studying and singing and praising and things like that than it is now. I don't know what happened. I think my body is rejecting the whole philosophy. I'm not sure, but I do appreciate it. My batteries are charged. I told Celeste last night, I said, I could stand up and preach for 3 hours right now. And she says, please don't. So I don't know. We're going to talk a little bit this morning about influence and things. But before we do, I want to share something that I heard that I thought was really funny. One of the preachers was telling in the course of his lesson, and I'm not sure who it was, but in the course of his lesson, he said that they were on a mission trip and they were far from home and they're in the church van, and their church van doesn't have any markings on it, but next to them pulled up a bus, and then he called it a church van later, so I assume it's a small church bus that had the name of a local Church of Christ on it. And he said somebody thought really, really fast, and they wrote 728B on a sheet of paper and held it up to the window. And immediately the people knew they were brothers in Christ. Now you younger folks don't understand that. Charlie didn't even understand it because he's from some other part of the world, Louisiana. I think it's in this country. But 728B, that used to be the song. Anybody know? There you go. Yeah, that's kind of like our official song sometimes, and I appreciate that. I did get a good quote from Bruce McClarty that I'd like to share with you, and he said, one of the things on his bucket list is to die without having ever bungee jumped. And that was one of my favorite quotes of the week. I wrote it down. We saw him at the restaurant on Thursday night, and I said, Brother Bruce, I've got one of your quotes I'm going to share with the congregation. And I said, I want to make sure I'm quoting you exactly verbatim. He said, yeah, that was true. He doesn't ever want to bungee jump, and I don't blame him for that. We're going to talk about giving an answer. We're going to talk about our influence. Last week we talked a little bit about sharing our faith and how can we lead others to Christ and things like that. We're going to follow up with that a little bit as we continue to talk about that. And I want to talk about influence. And you may not realize how much influence you really have in the world. This illustration wasn't in my sermon notes until this morning because it's something that happened last night. Last night, our granddaughter was with us at the Valentine's banquet, and she loved it. I think she's Judd's biggest fan now. She spent a lot of time clapping and laughing and having fun, looking at Judd and in all of his various poses. But tell you something else that I saw last night. When Haven, Scott Kuntz's stepdaughter, would assume a certain position in the floor to listen and to watch, she aped it. She mimicked it almost perfectly. And she would follow her almost perfectly and watch what she did. When Shelby came around waiting on our table, she followed Shelby around and acted and did the same things Shelby did. When Angie was working at the table and taking care of things, she acted just like Angie. And when she watched her Nana, she acted just like her Nana. I'm telling you that because even unintentionally, whether we're the greatest of us or whether we're the least of us, people are watching. People are watching. And we're teaching. Whether we know it or not, we're constantly teaching. You know, I don't know how many times I've heard it said, it's just as true as the first time I ever heard it said, people care more about what you do, and they see more in what you do than they hear what you say. You can say one thing and act differently, and everybody knows it immediately. You can say and be consistent, and everybody knows that immediately as well. And so we ought to strive to be that way. We ought to strive to, I don't know why there we go. My pictures were sideways and I couldn't see it. You know, Peter says that we ought always to be ready to give an answer for the faith or for the hope that's in us. I think sometimes we're not ready. We're afraid of that maybe. But here's a question. Do you know someone, anyone that's not a Christian? I bet you do. Most of us do. Most of us have friends or family or co-workers or neighbors or somebody we know that's not a Christian. Do we want them to obey the gospel? This is yes. Yes, we want them to be Christians just like we are. We want that more than anything, don't we? But what do we do about it? I mean, how do we ask? How do we talk to them? How do we, here's the thing. What if we bring up the subject of our faith and they ask a question that we don't have the answer for? Well, that's a scary thought. I mean, because we're supposed to know everything, right? I can tell you I don't. I can tell you nobody else in here does either. Now, Judd's been to college, and he studied science, but he doesn't even know everything. I've known dozens of people from all walks of life who have led others to Christ simply by sharing their faith. You know, one of the problems that we have is people think, well, I've got to be a preacher to win souls, or I've got to be a soul winner to win souls. I've got to be an evangelist to win souls. I've got to be a Bible class teacher to win souls. I've got to be this, that, or the other thing. I've got to be on a mission trip to win souls. And the truth of the matter is, being a soul winner basically consists of caring enough about somebody to share your faith with them. I look out in our congregation this morning and I see people who are here today, who are Christians today, simply because somebody loved them enough to share their faith with them. And that's what it took. And it wasn't necessarily somebody that was super special. I've seen people led to Christ by their teenage friends. And I've seen people led to Christ by retired people who just simply cared enough to share their faith. Everything in between, educated people and less educated people. I've seen people come to Christ simply because others care. And I think that's the most important thing that we need to understand, is that there's no specific strategy we need to adopt. You know, one of the things that one of the young preachers that was at the lectureship said was, you know, it's hard to get people involved. He says, I've got these ideas for all these programs. He said, but nobody wants to hear my ideas for the programs because I'm too young. And well, maybe it's because they haven't been sold on the program. We don't need a program. We just need to care. That's the key. We just need to really care. And there's no set of CDs you can listen to that have all the answers. There's no video to watch. There's no evangelism class you have to attend. There's no literature to distribute. There's no special method to be used at all. There's no revival that we need to host. There's no doors we need to knock. There's no calls we need to make. And yeah, we do a lot of those things. There's no doubt about that. We do many of those things, and we use some of those tools. But ultimately, soul winning is not about handing somebody a tract. Ultimately, soul winning is not about knocking on somebody's door. Ultimately, soul winning is not about hosting a revival or something like that. Soul winning is about you and me simply sharing the hope that we have. Simply caring enough about the people around us, the ones we care about, to tell them what Jesus has done for us. Because I can tell you, it's very true. I don't know if anybody's ever put it in better words than Newton did many, many years ago. I once was lost. I once was lost, but now I'm found. Praise God for His amazing grace. And you know we've got a lot of friends that are right there right now. They know they're lost. They just want to be found. They just don't know how to find the way. And if we're busy talking about other things, we might forget the most important thing. You see, what Jesus said was, "And I, if I be lifted up, will draw all men to me." We're here this morning not because George is the greatest preacher in the world, although that's true. Not because Judd is the greatest song leader in the world, although that's true too. Not because this is the most loving congregation in the world, although that's true. We're here this morning to lift up Jesus Christ. We're here to worship God who sent His Son to die so that we could have hope. And we're here to celebrate the life that we have in Jesus Christ, the fellowship that we have together, the love that we have to share with the world comes because Jesus was lifted up on that cross. And that's the greatest hope mankind has ever known. It's the greatest thing we will ever know about. And when people ask us about our faith, when people ask us what we believe in, when people ask us what is the Church of Christ, when people ask us what do you believe about whatever, it should start and it should end with Jesus Christ. That's where it needs to start. You're not going to change anybody's life by telling them about what color our pews are. You're not going to change anybody's life by telling them what color the curtain is back behind George. I don't know. Rod doesn't know either. We've been told, and we believe you, we trust you, but we don't really know, we just trust. We have faith. We need to start and finish there. My friend Langdon Wilson went home to his reward a couple of years ago. I have a few pictures of him in my office. When he was a young man, Langdon was in a motorcycle gang and got involved in a situation where an individual was killed. And he spent almost 12 years for his part in that in prison. Several years into his prison term, somebody brought him a Bible. You remember the old King James Bibles that had the little zipper that went all the way around, and the tag on the zipper was made in the shape of a cross instead of like a zipper tag, and they were really cheap Bibles. And so since they were really cheap Bibles, they could be given away. Somebody gave him one of those Bibles while he was in prison. And he started reading it. There was another inmate there who happened to be a member of the church and saw Langdon reading his Bible, and he said, it's kind of funny, do you understand what you're reading? And Langdon said, no, I really don't. And so the other fellow started studying with him. And Langdon became a New Testament Christian about 2 years before his term was up in prison. When he came out of prison, he couldn't wait to share the good news with others. Now let's go back a little bit. Before he got out of prison, during the last 2 years that he was in prison, he personally led 12 other inmates to Christ, and they were baptized. I'm not sure that's the appropriate way to start a prison ministry, but he was doing a pretty good job of it. He was doing a pretty good job of it. He came out and he went to IBC, and we were classmates at IBC. Lang and Karen were really close friends, and we campaigned together all over the world. And this particular picture here, he's at a concrete block building. We're in Belize. We're in a little village outside of Placencia in Belize. And that's the only building in town that had electricity. Now, I clarify that. There were, down at the base of the one light pole, there was like 100 extension cords plugged in down there. And they were plugged into each other, and they were plugged into power strips, they were plugged into everything, and they all ran to everybody's house. And some of them had like 200 feet of extension cord. And there was a little blue light in every house. That's because they had a TV. That's it. They were running their TVs or whatever. They didn't have water, running water. That was the building that had the running water. When Langdon stood up to preach that night, he started with, "In the beginning, God." And he finished with, "And the bride and the Spirit say, come." In other words, he started in Genesis 1, he finished in Revelation 22, and I don't think he left a word out. About 3 hours that particular night, about 3 hours, he passionately poured out his love for God. When he got done, it looked like the Jonestown Massacre. There were bodies laying all over the ground. People just went to sleep. They were there, they were listening. The children went to sleep in mom and dad's arms. Sometimes mom and dad went to sleep. They'd worked all day. Langdon preached all night. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Tell you something about Langdon Wilson. He probably was one of the least talented preachers I've ever known as far as standing up in front of people. Maybe that's why everybody went to sleep. But you'll never see a man with a greater passion for sharing his faith. You'll never meet somebody like that. Well, I met a few. This last week, I spent some time with Keith Parker. And if you know Keith Parker, you know Keith Parker has a passion for sharing his faith with others. Keith Parker has a passion for helping us to share our faith with others, and that's a good thing, and we need that. And we need these men that are willing to share their faith. But you know, it really comes down to us as individuals sharing our faith. One night while we were in Belize, we got awakened. There was this terrible clamor downstairs. In Belize, the part of the town that we were staying in Belize City was pretty rough. And they would bring tin sheet metal, and they put sheet metal across the doors and stuff so that people couldn't break in and rob you while you're asleep. And we didn't have, in that particular hotel we were in, didn't have windows. It just had a hole in the wall, and the walls didn't go all the way to the floor or all the way to the ceiling, so that way the airflow could come in because it's hot. And so we're sleeping there, and there's this terrible clamor downstairs. They come up and they said, "Who is Langdon Wilson?" And so Lang says, "That's me." And so I go downstairs with Lang to see what's going on. And there's two men there that he had baptized that morning. He had met them out in the city park, and Lang brought them to Christ. And that's a great thing. It was a wonderful thing. They'd had a study. And so they did the only thing that non-Christians who've never been around Christians in their life know how to do to celebrate now they're saved. You know what they did? They went out and got drunk. Now we think that's disrespectful. They didn't know any better. What they knew was they're saved now. They were lost yesterday. They were lost when they woke up this morning. They're saved now. They want to go celebrate. So they go to tell all of their friends, and they start celebrating with all their friends. And then they want to come back and celebrate some more with Langdon because he's the one that led them to Christ. We finally got them coffeeed up and calmed down. It happens. It happens. Because the drawing power of the cross comes from lifting up Jesus, not from our own expertise. We don't have all the answers, and it's hard sometimes because Peter says we're supposed to always have an answer. Well, here's the answer: Jesus. That's the answer. Now and then. That's the answer. It always has been. And the question, I guess, is, well, how do we do it? You know, how do I share my faith to somebody else that can lead them to the hope of eternal life? And how can I, how can you, how can we be a soul winner? Because that's not something, that's almost a scary term for us. We're almost afraid to use the terminology. It starts by making friends with non-Christians. I know some Christians who have taken that notion of be concerned that evil companions are going to corrupt good morals to the point where they don't have anything to do with anybody in the world. You know, Paul addressed that specifically. He said, you're not to have anything to do with a brother who walks in ungodliness and unrighteousness. He said, I don't say not to have anything to do with anybody that does that, because otherwise you'd have to come out of the world, because people of the world live that way. But he says, don't have anything to do with a Christian brother, someone who claims to be a brother who lives that kind of lifestyle. But we got to live in the world, and as we live in the world, we need to make friends with folks. You know, some people may have a casual acquaintance or two that are not Christians. They may have a co-worker that they spend a few minutes at work with that's not a Christian. They may even have some family members that they avoid as much as possible because they're not Christians. But do you have any close friends who are not Christians? Some of us do. Some of us probably, if we're honest with ourselves, we really don't have any close friends that are not Christians. We've withdrawn ourselves from the world, and we've withdrawn our influence from the world. By so doing, we ought to do that. And that's not saying we ought to allow the world or the wickedness of the world to influence us in our own lives. Just 6 chapters earlier, though, Paul said, I became all things to all men that I might by some means win some. Paul wants us to be out and about and trying to reach people. He also reminds the Thessalonians that before they became Christians, they observed his way of life. He was among them. He was out and about in the community. He was out and about and they saw him. And they're simply saying, we've got to make friends with folks if we're going to be able to reach out to folks. You know who the biggest friend of sinners was, maybe? Was Jesus. Over and over again, those isolationists of his day, the Pharisees, the Sadducees, those religious leaders that wouldn't have anything to do with sinners, they were upset with Jesus mainly, as much as anything else, because he spent time with sinners. He can't be a very good man. If he was a righteous man, he'd know what kind of woman this is that's touching him. If he was a righteous man, he wouldn't be going to a tax collector's house. No. If he was a righteous man, if he really was the Son of God like he claims to be, if he was really from God, if he really was all of those things that he claims to be, he wouldn't be hanging out with all these sinners. No, not at all. But Jesus said he came to seek and save the very ones who were lost. And so he spent time with them. He spent time with tax collectors. He spent time with the woman at the well. He spent time with people who had very little hope and very much sin. Not to join in, but to bring them out. You know, when we develop a friendship with somebody that doesn't know Christ, the very first step in breaking down their barrier to the gospel is that friendship itself. Sometimes just visiting with somebody and getting to know them a little bit gives you a chance to share your faith with them, gives you a chance to share your hope with them. The other night, we're at a restaurant, and there was the cutest baby there. I mean, he was absolutely, or she was, absolutely adorable. And she was playing a game with a straw that involved knocking over a toy, and Gail said she's going to knock over that big glass of water here in a minute. She did. But before that, I went over and I asked her mom and dad, I said, do you mind if I pray for your baby? And they're like, okay, who is this weird guy? But I had my Freed Hardman name badge on, so maybe they thought I was okay because of that. And they said, yeah, that'd be great. So I prayed that mom and dad would have the skill and the wisdom to raise that little girl up, that she would find true love in her life, and most of all, that she would one day follow Christ. And I prayed out loud. I kissed her on the head and gave her back to her mama. Her mama was impressed. The baby didn't try to move or squirm or wiggle or anything, just simply looked at me the whole time I was praying. We can influence absolute strangers through prayer. It happens. It happens. One of the ways that we can reach people is through friendship. Another way is to just let our life arouse other people's interest in Christ. By the way, that particular young couple happened to be Freed-Hardman students, I found out after the prayer. And they appreciated it. I don't know this for sure, but I think the conversation that I partially overheard as I was going back to my table was something along the line of, I wish he'd have prayed for our son too. That's what I think I heard as I was walking away. And maybe I should have. But I wanted to recognize and lift up my Lord to these folks in this restaurant. We can do that. We can do that. And I've never yet had anybody say, oh no, I don't want you to pray for my baby. Or no, I don't want you to pray for my tears. Or no, I don't want you to pray for my sick relative. Or no, I don't want you to pray for my marital status. Or no, I don't want you to pray for my financial status. Every time I've ever seen someone who looked like they were in need of prayer and offered to pray, you know what I've heard? Yes. Yes. And it's not that I have some special power. And it's not that you have some special power, but I can draw on a mighty powerful God. And when I speak to God, I'm speaking to the creator of the world. And you are too. Peter said we're supposed to always be prepared to give an answer, but before we do that, people need to see something different about us. We've got to be different. You know, at work or school, we need to do more than our share. You know, we need to be the ones that when we're out there, people see us and they say there's something different about them. They try harder. They work harder. They may play harder. They live harder. I want to tell you something about the Christian life. Jesus said he came that we may have life and have it more abundantly. I have never had a richer, fuller life in my life until I decided to turn my life over to Jesus and to have the full life that Christ promised. I live a full life. I have all kinds of friends. I have all kinds of things that I do. My life is full and full and full and full and full, and it's because I can live my life with the confidence of knowing that I have God right there with me everywhere I go, that I have an assurance of a hope at the end of this life that goes far beyond anything else. We ought to be, of all the people in the world, the happiest people walking around. We ought to be, of all the people in the world, the most caring people that walk around. And when we see somebody that's hurting, when we see somebody that's sad, when we see a teacher that's being abused, or we see a neighbor that's not being liked by everybody else, we ought to be the ones to stand up for them. It was Christians who stood up and said, slavery's wrong. It was Christians who stood up and said, hey, we need hospitals for the poor. It was Christians who stood up and said, hey, it's not right to have all of these children that don't have a place to sleep at night, and we need to make sure there's a place for them to sleep. Yes, that was Christians who stood up for what they believed in. Because we, of all people, have been most blessed. And we ought to share those blessings with others and how wonderful that is. Even when we're being mistreated, people ought to see the joy in our lives. Sometimes, though, we need to make sure we keep our answer focused on Jesus. You know, when people ask about our faith and why we have the faith we have and the hope we have, it's nice to say, well, that's because I'm a member of such and such church and I have a good church support family. And we do have that. I love that. And that's great. Maybe because, well, I've got such a good Bible class teacher that I've learned all these things. Or maybe because our song leader's so good that we just love to sing and it helps me and it lifts me up or something like that. But when people ask about the hope that we have, we're supposed to give an answer. And the answer starts and ends, as I've already said, with Jesus. That's not the time to debate issues. That's not the time to talk about, all kinds of things. You know, we look at that and we wonder about that. That's not the time to do that. We don't have to say, well, you know, the most important thing is whether or not you use a piano when you worship. The most important thing is that you take communion every single first day of the week. Well, the most important thing is that you read your Bible and you pray every day. Well, the most important thing is that you use the King James Version of the Bible. Well, the most important thing is Jesus. I want to tell you something. It may hurt some feelings, but we need to make sure we're clear and understand this. And I don't intend to hurt any feelings, but it may hurt some feelings. It doesn't matter if somebody's been married and divorced 457 times and every one of them's unscriptural. If they're not a Christian, they're lost. And it doesn't matter if they get married one time to one spouse and they live the rest of their life faithfully all the way till death. If they're not a Christian, they are lost. Issues are not where we need to be focused. Issues actually spend more time dividing people than they do uniting people. Now, I'm not saying there aren't some important doctrinal things we need to teach people, but Jesus says, go into the whole world and teach the gospel, baptize people into Christ, and then teach them the doctrines they need to know to live as a Christian. Because you can live as a Christian your whole life and still be lost if you never become a Christian in the first place. And I think sometimes we get the cart in front of the horse. I hope I didn't offend anybody. I hope I didn't. But it's the honest truth of the way Jesus taught it and taught us to teach it. We try to do, maybe that's the answer we ought to give when somebody brings up an issue. We just try to do what our Bible says the best we understand it. But those issues are nothing compared to the sacrifice of the cross. So when someone asks you, why don't you use a piano? Well, we try to do what the Bible teaches us to do, the best we understand it. But that's nothing compared to the sacrifice of Jesus on the cross. Have we talked about that? Oh, well, yeah, I know our church is different. We take communion the first day every single week, and I know other churches don't necessarily do that. We're just trying to do follow the Bible the best as we understand. But the important thing is the reason we take communion is to remember Jesus. Let me tell you about Jesus. Because that's where they need to be. And that's how we win people to Christ. We keep our answers focused on Jesus all the time. Paul says, I resolved to know nothing while I was with you except Jesus Christ and Him crucified, when he wrote to the church at Corinth. Is that all he knew? Oh, no. Is that all he taught them? No, not even close. But it was the most important thing, and he understood that. So when I'm asked about my hope, I tell them about Jesus. You know, the Corinthian church, they love to debate. They just love to debate. They wanted knowledge and they wanted to debate and all kinds of things like that. When I'm asked about my hope, I tell them my hope is that God sent His Son to die for my sins. I share that quite often up here from the pulpit. I said the one thing you ought to take from the lesson if you don't get anything else, the one word you ought to hear if you don't hear anything else, and if you're listening right now, the one thing you need to hear more than anything else we've got to say today is God in heaven loved you personally so much He sent His Son to die so that you don't have to spend eternity in hell. That's the one most important message in the world. We need to share that with everybody, every opportunity that we get, and we ought to care enough to do that. We don't need to talk about the church of Christ. We need to talk about Jesus Christ. Now, Jesus has His church. And there's a time that comes to talk about His church. And yes, we talk about His church. But when someone's lost, they don't need to hear about anything other than Jesus Christ. Because that's where salvation comes from. There's no other name under heaven by which we may be saved. Or must be saved, depending on what translation you're reading from. There is no other way. And the ultimate question that we need to ask them when we get them and we get to the point where we can tell them about Jesus, the most important question, if you want to open up a study with a friend, what does Jesus mean to you? Sincerely and seriously taking the time to just stop for a minute and say, what does Jesus mean to you, Alan? What does Jesus mean to you, Vicki? What does Jesus mean to you, Jennifer? And let them have a chance to share what they believe. And then you can add to them the teachings of Jesus Christ, who came and died for their sins. Because for many of our friends, what Jesus means to them is a name they read about or somebody they've heard about. And maybe they understand that he probably died on a cross, but they really don't know much more about him than that. And there's an opportunity to share. And don't press too hard. Oh, man, we all know people that they're just so overbearing, you just don't want to be around them, right? This is yes. It's okay. You can talk about me. I've got thick skin. Sometimes we can press so hard that we drive people away from God. And I tell you something else. It is easy to judge and condemn other people. Man, you look at somebody else's tattoos or somebody else's piercings or somebody else's clothes or somebody else's hair or somebody else's whatever it is, their skin color, whatever it is, you look at them and you see the differences between you and them, and it's easy to judge somebody else for not being perfect like we are. Okay, maybe we're not perfect. Maybe we're not perfect. Peter says we're supposed to give an answer in gentleness, not out of arrogance. And I know it's difficult not to judge other folks that are different. I mean, they look different, they act different. The other day, yesterday I was at Walmart picking up our order, and this guy came, and his earrings were master locks. He had a lock hanging out of each ear. Well, so y'all are giggling. Why are we judging this guy? That's his choice. What's the difference in having 2 master locks and having 2 guitars, other than the fact that they're bigger, unless he had a full-size guitar, which would be really weird. How would you like it? Because the first thing we do when we see all of these differences in people is decide they wouldn't be interested in hearing about Jesus. How would you like it if somebody else made the decision whether you get to go to heaven or hell? I wouldn't like that. Wouldn't like it. Dennis, would you like that? No, not at all. Coach Pat, would you want somebody else to decide whether or not you get to go to hell or heaven? No, she says no either. You see, the truth of the matter is, when we don't share our faith with somebody because we've prejudged whether or not they would be interested in hearing, that's exactly what we're doing. We're making the decision whether they get to go to heaven or hell. And we wouldn't want anybody to do that for us. Aren't you glad somebody cared enough about you to share the gospel with you? Aren't you? I am. I'm so thankful. While everybody else was condemning the woman that was caught in adultery, Jesus not only didn't condemn her, but he offered her salvation and hope in John chapter 8. And when we show people love and compassion instead of disgust and condemnation, we'll be surprised about how many people want to hear more about our Jesus. Years ago, I was walking through the hospital halls and I saw a family huddled together in a room. They were crying. The husband's name, the father's name, was Russell Reed. Went to visit with them for a minute because they're crying. They're sitting there. Obviously, they have something going on in their life. They're distressed about something. So I go to them and I say, hey, I'm George. I'm one of the chaplains here at the hospital because I volunteered at that particular hospital as a chaplain. I said, I'm one of the chaplains here at the hospital. I noticed that you seem to be distraught. Can I pray with you about something? And so they shared with me. Russell had just been diagnosed with brain cancer. There were several tumors, and they were going to try to do surgery and chemo and things like that to reduce it, but he had been given a terrible diagnosis. And so, yes, pray with us. So I prayed with them. And then I invited them to church after the prayer, and I went on about my business. Sunday morning, they were there. They were at church. Visited with them a little longer. I think we took them to lunch that day and found out that she had grown up in the church. He'd never been around a church in his life of any form. And we started visiting, and they kept coming to church. And over the course of several surgeries, 3 major surgeries, where they went in and took out part of his brain while they were taking out the tumor to try to make sure they got all the tumor. And he had to be awake for some of those surgeries because they had to make sure how it would affect his motor skills as they were removing part of his brain to do the surgery. Over the course of 3 or 4 surgeries, Russell kept saying, well, I need to become a Christian, but he never did anything about it. Finally, one day, we're sitting at his kitchen table. We're looking out over the backyard back there. Cindy's in there in the kitchen, and it's actually one room, but she's in the kitchen area, and she's making coffee for us. And Russell and I are sitting at the table, and she brings us coffee, and I said, Russell, I said, I need to talk to you about something that's really important. I said, one of these nights, I said, because these things always happen at night, one of these nights, Cindy is going to call me, and she's going to be crying because her heart's going to be broken. And she's going to say, George, Russell has died. And she's going to say, George, will you do his funeral? I said, and she's going to ask me that because I'm her preacher, and I give her comfort, and she knows that. And Russell said, oh yeah, we've already talked about that. I want you to do my funeral when I die. He interrupted me to say that. And I said, Russell, how in the world am I going to offer her any comfort at all when you and me both know you're going to hell? He said, I guess I need to be baptized, don't I? And I said, I guess you do. And that day, Russell Reed became a child of God. And 2.5 years later, when I got a phone call from Cindy, I went back to Kentucky and I preached a funeral and reminded our friends of the hope that my brother Russell had, that Paul had promised in 1 Thessalonians 4. And I was able to comfort her with those words. Folks, we've got friends that are lost. And the only way they're going to not be lost is if we share our faith. Maybe this morning you're one of those. Maybe this morning you've never put Jesus on in baptism. Maybe you've thought about it and you've put it off. And you say, well, I don't know enough. When I know more, maybe I'll become a Christian. When I'm ready, maybe I'll become a Christian. When the time is right, maybe I'll become a Christian. Or maybe when I read some more, or I hear some more, or I know some more. Let me tell you, all you need to know if you want to be a child of God is that God sent his son to die for you so that you could have the hope of eternal life, and you can believe those words, believe that teaching from God, and accept Jesus as Lord of your life, and be immersed into water for the remission of your sins, and walk out of here just as saved as anybody in the history of the world. That's all you need to know. Oh, now there's more to learn later. That's called growing. Maybe you need to grow. Maybe you need to come. Whatever your needs are, won't you come?